Once again, a very warm welcome to the audience all over the globe, wherever you are. We're extremely happy to have our first, hello. Now I'm facing technical issues. So, is it solved? Can you hear me?
I hear you, Sebastian. I think we should just roll with it. People on the chat apparently can hear us. So.
Okay, so if everybody can hear us, we'll just rock and roll, as Will Secombe lets us know. All right, so let's get going. You've heard all the pre-talk anyway, so we can cut the story short. We are happy to have you here. We're happy to have 6 personalities from 6 regions all over the world with us today, and let's dive right into it. I'll introduce Carol Hay to the audience. Carol, your motto is living life to the fullest. I love that. So besides living life to the fullest, you are founder and CEO of Mackenzie Gale Limited, a global tourism marketing and development company. You've been heading the Caribbean tourism organization in the UK and Europe for 10 years and are still doing that now with your present company. And you have had senior roles with vital tourism organizations for the last 25 years. Your core passion for helping others takes up much of your spare time. But what we like to hear from you today is what is your opinion on how this specific situation will have impact on the development of tourism in the Caribbean? Carol, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian, and thank you to everyone, to my fellow panel members and to everyone who's taken the time to join this call. Yes, I love tourism. It's a wonderful industry to be in, but it's not without its challenges. And as you've said, my background is primarily in Caribbean tourism, where my passion lies. But of course, I have an appreciation for the world. Now, looking at coronavirus, the Caribbean received, a backhanded compliment in the terms of, it's being said that we're handling the crisis so well because we're so used to dealing with crises. And so I say it's a backhanded compliment because to an extent, yes, it's true. We are in a region that many people know we have experienced volcanoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, and yet as a region, we remain resilient, focused. And once coronavirus was upon our region, we had to draw upon all the resources that we have gained as a region over the years. And one of the reasons why we were able to go into lockdown so quickly and to be, disciplined as disciplined as we could be is simply the fact that, many destinations said, let's go into hurricane mode. Let us act and behave as we would when there's a hurricane. We protect our homes, we protect our workplaces, we follow the protocols, we ensure we have the essential items. And so it was very easy to get into that mode. But of course, tourism is the #1 foreign exchange earner for the majority of Caribbean destinations. And it has been said that we are one of the most tourism dependent regions in the world. So while we look at this business of coronavirus and we look at the business of tourism, we realize as a region that sooner or later we had to come up with a plan. Now, in any plan, you have to look at the risk. And the Caribbean had to look at 2 major risks. The risk of staying closed and doing nothing, or the risk of opening up for tourism. And many destinations in the Caribbean have announced, there are some destinations, Jamaica, Antigua, that are opened and have been open for a few days now. And there are a number of destinations that plan to open up within the month of July. And each of these countries has a stage plan that works best for them. And right throughout the process, they've had to look at the risk of opening up, of going back into tourism. There's a major economic risk of not if you don't open. And then, of course, there is a social risk and environmental risk if you do open. So the risk have been measured and various countries have come up with their strategies, and we move forward with this business of tourism. Now, of course, for us in the Caribbean, tourism is greatly about the people. Whenever you speak to people and you say, what did you like about the Caribbean? What remained with you? And they always talk about the people and the friends and the engagement. So our tourism is delivered through people. So we couldn't just become all high tech about it and say, right, we'll take people out of the picture. That's the charm, the essence of Caribbean tourism. So in opening up for tourism, we had to look at our communities. How can we protect them, preserve them, and ensure that we do not have, in some cases, a first wave of coronavirus, let alone a second wave? And for us as well, it's all about realigning that visitor experience. The Caribbean is a lot of the experiences are about getting out, exploring, tasting, feeling that vibe, the culture, the heritage, the history. And in order to achieve that and to continue to have our communities involved in tourism, we had to look at how we're going to realign that visitor experience so that we can help our communities, we can deliver what we do best, and people go back home safely. You know, we don't want people coming to the Caribbean and being quarantined. Sure, some of our quarantine areas are just as beautiful because we are a tropical area, but at the same time, it's not what they're paying for. So how do we get this to work? Well, there are many countries within the Caribbean, but I've looked at what some of the destinations have been doing, their plan, their strategy, and how they're going to manage going forward. And whilst each destination may be a bit different in what they're doing, there are certain synergies and best practices. So right across the Caribbean, number one issue that the destinations are addressing is safety. Safety for the local people, safety for the tourism communities, safety for the visitors coming in. So some of the things that people are going to be required to do is to be tested and, of course, present a negative test result. This result has to be shared online. They have to bring proof to the Caribbean. And then when they arrive in the Caribbean, we will do temperature checks. If the temperature checks and all of those are fine, great. Have a wonderful experience, but of course we will still track and trace. We still need to know where people are staying. So you need a lot of collaboration at the cruise ports, the airports, to ensure that once people have arrived, if the test proved negative, that should an incident arise, we're able to trace exactly where they are. Also, the safety of everyone at all our ports is important, and that is being managed right across the Caribbean. Bear in mind that most of our countries are island states, so it's going to be really important to protect all ports of entries into the Caribbean and ensure the protocols are in place. Another important thing for any destination where you have a strong community involvement in tourism is the training. It's absolutely wonderful to have all of these rules and guidelines and plans, but if no one knows where to find them, if they don't know how to adhere to them, how to ask any queries or questions, the plan will not work. So training has become very important across the Caribbean, and a lot of training is taking place right now to upgrade skills, but also to ensure that any plan that is put in place by a destination, every single person within the tourism value chain knows what their role is in delivering the recovery program, in protecting their product, their service, their community. So training has been critical across the Caribbean. Another really important aspect for us is communication, because right across the region, we've had people in the community saying, but we don't have COVID in our destination. Why do we want to invite people to our shores? that have COVID. What will that mean for us, the communities? So the whole recovery plan has had to be communicated into every single household, community, so that people understand that yes, tourism is important, but it's not just about getting money. It's about a recovery plan for a country, its economy, its environment, and its communities. And therefore, the people within the Caribbean has taken the whole element of tracking, tracing, and reporting coronavirus very, very seriously, because they understand that will mitigate the impact, the spread, and protect the communities. So communication is key in the whole mix, and not only internal communication, but communication to all the key source markets, so that potential visitors, the travel agents, the tour operators, the airlines, they understand what's happening with the Caribbean, how we work together, and what's in place for us to receive visitors. Another important area for us as well is funding. I had to check my notes, because we now need a lot of personal protection equipment within the Caribbean that we didn't need before. And that said, COVID has also impacted negatively on some of the cottage industries, some of the local manufacturers. So within the destinations, a lot of the work to create the protective gears are being given to local companies that right now their industries are on a hold. And we've seen greater innovation where some of our rum factories are now making hand sanitizers and other essential cleaning equipment. Now, of course, we all want them to go back to rum sooner or later, but right now the focus for us is hygiene, and therefore we're able to, within the Caribbean, produce a lot of the supplies that we need in the fight against COVID, thus limiting what we're currently importing right now and giving business within the communities. And the final thing for us in this recovery is engagement. It's important to have engagement on every single level. We need to keep speaking to the airlines, the cruise lines, the tour operators, our local operators, the travel trade, the media. Even forums such as this are incredibly important to state what a region that is so dependent on tourism is doing. And through all of this, if we engage, if we share the plan, and if we state to everyone what we need them to do to ensure that the Caribbean remains safe, viable, and in the business of tourism, if we all play our part, we will get through this. Now, we've said that right through this, we've realized that there is no vaccine for COVID. There is no quick win solution. It's not something we can erase. So what we're looking at doing is living with COVID. And all of what we do is about having a vibrant, sustainable tourism industry as we live with tourism. And those are my opening comments for the Caribbean and the Caribbean Tourism Organization UK chapter, who I represent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. I've seen one or two questions. I've already made some notes of questions that I have, but I will connect them until our Q&A session. I would just hop on to Tallahassee, Florida, not too far from the Caribbean, and say hello to Will. Will Second.
Sebastian, thank you so much, and thank you for the welcome. Carol, that was a really great overview of everything that you're dealing with in the Caribbean, and I can highlight several of those, reiterate several of those points as well. I think it's really interesting. I hosted an event for international tour operators from 40 countries in February, and then in late February that went to hosted another event in Los Angeles with receptive tour operators, and everybody was so incredibly optimistic about 2020 and the future of travel. And you know, we've been riding this incredible wave of 10 years of increased visitor growth, and I think every destination around the world was showing record after record after record. And then we came up in that last minute cancellation of ITB, and all of a sudden we all recognized how how vulnerable our tourism industry is to global events. And unlike any crisis that I've dealt with, from viruses like Zika or oil spills or hurricanes, fires, all the different crises, this is different in that it hit the entire world at the exact same time. And the global tourism economy came to a standstill. And that's that really crazy dynamic, and that we are all in this wherever we are today. We're trying to rebuild an industry that is one of the most important industries in the world. And as we, I think, have fought over the years to get the credibility and people to understand how important the travel and tourism industry is to our local communities, now everybody understands that. We're no longer trying to fight for the importance of tourism. The globe is in a recession, and the tourism industry is in a depression. And our industry is really the halt of travel and tourism. Is what's brought most of the economies to a halt. So here in the United States, again, Carol, I think your points of understanding that people are not going to travel again until people are comfortable and they're confident that they're going to be safe. We're comfortable that our hotels and our airlines and our attractions are going to be clean and safe, and we're not going to be at risk. And right now, I think confidence is the single most important thing that any of us in the travel industry can do to help get our industry back. In the United States, it's been the United States Travel Association has done a fantastic job issuing some protocols. I think that we don't know what is going to shake out. Certainly, as you all remember, after 9/11, many things changed in the travel industry. We're still taking off our shoes 19 years after Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, tried to blow up a plane. So whatever happens is going to be with us for a long time. So I think it's really, really important to have conversations like this, that we get it right. I think, again, as Carol mentioned, I don't think anybody will ever get on a plane now without having your temperature checked. I think that's going to be a new normal. I am currently in the business of hosting events for travel and tourism industry. And our first event will be in Orlando, Florida in September. We'll have another one in October in Las Vegas. And those events will be very, very different than the events that we held in February. You will have your temperature checked. Masks are going to be required. Everything will be cleaned, multiple times throughout the day. There'll be plexiglass shields in between the one-on-one appointments. So we will enter into a new normal, but I think that is really, really important that we enter into that new normal as soon as we can, so that we can start to facilitate people getting confident in traveling again. Here in the United States, we're starting to see things open up. People are traveling. I can tell you that there are some destinations in the States that are doing extraordinarily well. Obviously, the beaches are doing great. People are getting outdoors. I was out on a river canoeing yesterday, and it was, there's nothing better than social distancing on the river in the water. Although it was very hazy, and the good news, Carol, is we're not going to have to worry about the hurricanes for a while with the Sahara sandstorms that are coming across. But anyway, I think people are starting to travel. They're starting to travel regionally. Lots of talk about the summer of the Great American Road Trip and people getting out and about and exploring, because that's what we do. As gentleman Peter Yesowich, who used to, always was one of my idols when I started coming in this business, but talked about travel is a fundamental human right. We want to travel. We want to get out and explore and connect and meet new cultures, new people, and we're going to do that. And right now, the only barrier is people's confidence and being able to ensure that them and their family are going to be safe. The flip side of that is, I think that destinations around the country and certainly around the world, again, to Carol's point, was how quickly we want to invite people back into our communities. How do we balance the economic impact of, visitors coming in and supporting our small businesses, our restaurants, our attractions, with the need to make sure that we're not inviting more illness into the community. So those are some of the challenges that we have. I'm very optimistic about the the future of our industry. I don't think there's probably ever been a time when our industry has been recognized as important as it is to the local communities in which we serve. And I think it's really an opportunity for us to, as an industry, to reevaluate how it is that we build the travel and tourism into the kind of the DNA of our communities as we reopen.
All right, Will, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. And I think just the last few sentences already suggest such a huge amount of topics that could be discussed, and could be discussed probably even in a very controversial way. But the good news is that during this BUZZ Digital Expo, we have some of these subjects, and I think you even host one of these events as well yourselves, that reserved and own the topic for keynotes. So stay tuned and let us keep these issues in our minds and take them forward during this week in discussing what really is forming our future. Thanks, and we'll get back to you then later. I have now the pleasure of introducing Dr. Walter Mzembe. Walter is based now in South Africa, I believe in Johannesburg. Walter, you are in Johannesburg today? Yes. Walter is also very well known to the travel industry because for more than 10 years, he has been the Minister of Tourism for Zimbabwe. And also he was the candidate of the African Union for an elective post of Secretary General of the United Nations World Tourism Organization in May 2017. But there were so many political challenges for him that he then took over responsibility in the Foreign Service. After that, retired out of the political life, but is still very active in tourism, a global independent tourism consultant, also in analytics he's taking care of. And Walter, I'm very much looking forward to hear how you see personally the situation on the African continent, keeping in mind that it is very diverse and we cannot just speak for Africa as such, or can we?
You know, I will speak on behalf of Africa generically, but let me hasten to say that winning the perception war is essentially what Africa has to do. COVID-19 has taken a very curiously and comparatively lenient trajectory in Africa. The West had been forecast to happen in the continent on the back of what is known to be a very fragile health system and poor infrastructure in the continent. But looking back, although this should not signal complacency that we have been spared the brunt of coronavirus, Africa has certainly been spared the brunt, at least for now. I don't have answers as to why it has been spared. Some alluded to genetics, our genetics as Africans. Some alluded to divine providence, and yet others alluded to the youth bulge, the youth dividend. But I don't have answers. There's a school of thought that thinks that it's our tropical climate, our home tropical climate have served us at the time that this pandemic broke out. But Africa, with 55 countries, and here are the facts, is yet to breach the 10,000 death threshold. And to date, 380,000 confirmed cases have been recorded, and a nearly 50% recovery rate. A very optimistic picture and scenario in the context of 10 million global cases and 500,000 deaths. So Africa, in summary, statistically, hosts less than 5% of coronavirus cases and 2% of global deaths to date. But unfortunately, Africa is not able to communicate its relative safety and resilience within the context of the devastating impact of coronavirus elsewhere, as we've come to know it in the world's epicenters. And I will demonstrate how and why. If you rank the world's top 10 global death cases, we all know that obviously the USA leads, followed by Brazil, United Kingdom, Italy, France, Spain, Mexico, India, Iran, Belgium, and Germany. But curiously, when you read about the world's 100 safest destinations, as published by Deep Knowledge Consortium just recently, in fact, a week ago, these countries that I have just shouted or listed, they all appear within and inside the 100 safest destinations. In fact, with the United States at 58 safest destination, Brazil 91st safest destination, United Kingdom 68 safest destination, Italy 53 safest destination, France 60 safest destination, going down to Germany, second safest destination after Switzerland. At the bottom of the Deep Knowledge Consortium ranking, which is similar to other rankings elsewhere, if I may reference, is South Sudan. And interestingly, and ironically, as I've already alluded to, these countries have safer destination rankings than any of us in Africa. And you will see that in the Deep Knowledge Consortium ranking, the first appearance of African countries is Republic of South Africa at number 69, Egypt at number 86, Tunisia 87 safest destination, and Algeria 93 safest destination. These are the only 4 countries in Africa that appear within and inside that 100 safest destination. But also ironically, the same 4 countries also account for 60% of African cases and deaths, and quite interestingly, may account for the same in terms of tourism receipts and arrivals in Africa. And I think this attests to the fact that tourism itself and our openness, which we have been celebrating over a long period of time, may in itself have been the vector that facilitated the spread of coronavirus just before its outbreak. Having said that, let me share what, for example, Deep Knowledge Consortium assessed countries on to come up to that ranking, which I'm contesting, but also at the same time, which I'm saying to Africans, they have to understand how they are seen from source markets and from the outside world in order to correct certain perceptions. The Deep Knowledge Consortium assessed countries based on risk management. And this included quarantine efficiency, detection, it included monitoring, and the next parameter, group cohort of parameters was health readiness. But even more importantly for African countries, it was the issue of government efficiency. And it is in this area of government efficiency that I will demonstrate why African governments need to spruce up their act so that they are also ranked favorably and not consigned to unsafe countries. So the first big question is, why are the rest of the least affected countries not making it into these and other safety and security rankings, and the world's worst affected countries make it, while at least a few African countries scrape through? What would a top 10, top 30, and let alone top 50 brand ranking mean for countries that I have already listed, like the United Kingdom, USA, Italy, and France? Who influences these brand rankings and cutoffs, and why? At the outbreak of COVID-19, I think we all agree that it was a quick response and high levels of emergency preparedness, according to Deep Knowledge Consortium, that determined whether a country was safe or not. But as we now dip into the new normal that we have been alluding to earlier on, Carol and Will, we find that the economic resilience itself is beginning to measure whether a country is safe and secure. The ability of a country to withstand lockdowns in itself is beginning to be measured as a safety and security parameter. So merely being in charge, and I make this appeal to African countries, merely being in charge and commandeering lockdown stages and accompanying measures alone will not inspire market and brand confidence. and the government reliability and efficiency is beginning to count in those parameters that are being assessed and measured in source countries that many of you on this panel and part of my audience represent. So it's back to trust, or surety, as we call it elsewhere. And surety is the point at which safety, security, reputation, and economic viability meet together. And it is in this area that I'm saying, notwithstanding that we are least affected in African countries and as a continent, we have a surety deficit, because when you bring all these factors together, they then score us as insecure, as not being safe. And this makes Africa, I go back to my point of contention, it makes Africa a victim of perception, informed or uninformed. And it is in this space that I see Africa's opportunity existing. If it wins the perception war, Africa's tourism will come back rapidly to where it was 73 million arrivals as at the close of 2019. So let me share with you, colleagues, panelists, and the audience, that I've been mandated through the African Tourism Board to lead their safety, security, crisis, and disaster management committee, to lead Africa in this battlefront, to help it tell its own story, to brand its story, and to sell it. You can have the least death cases, the least coronavirus cases. If you are not able to tell your story, if you are not able to brand it, you will not be able to sell the surety of Africa to bring back tourism into the continent. So right. The question is, how are we going to do it? The immediate challenge confronting us in Africa, obviously, is the geographical size of the continent and this diversity across all spheres, social, political, economic. 55 countries means 55 brands. It also means that we have to deal with a continent that is seen as one country out there in the international consumer countries. When they talk about us, they see only one country, and yet we're a conglomerate of 55 countries. So we've set it upon ourselves in the African Tourism Board to disaggregate the size of Africa as a solution to segment and differentiate products and product offerings in this enormous continent. So that if one constituent part is not doing well, it cannot pose collateral damage to the other and to the rest of the product, which is Africa. So we have agreed in the continent that we will follow, without adopting or inventing the wheel, we will follow the African Union geographical and regional economic community segmentations. We recognize that potentially there could be as many safety and security protocols as the number of countries in Africa, 55. And that in itself presents problems. And yet the tourists, when they visit us, they do more than one country per visit. So as a matter of urgency, I wish to share with you that within the context of the ATB Safety and Security Mandate, which I've been asked to chair, we are pursuing the following objectives. The first one is the centralization of data, because if you have 55 protocols, it means you have a lot of data on your hand and it can confuse markets in coming back. So we're going to be dealing with the consolidation of all this data at country level to deal with the issues on crime statistics, number of hospitals, doctors, ambulances, training programs, etc.
Walter, would you please interrupt me for one question I have at this point? Is that okay with you?
Sure.
Is that referring to the Project Hope that was launched by African Tourism Board on the June 20th? That is the context of yes, Project Hope. So my question would be, would that be possible for you to share the specific stages that you were going to introduce now with us at a later stage? Because just looking at the time, we have to proceed with our panel now. But I think the audience is extremely interested in learning details about the whole Project Hope the suggestions that are being outlined right now in detail. Is that okay?
Yes, certainly. So just in summary, in conclusion, we are seized with it, but we must leave this panel and the continent with one message that Africa is a natural coronavirus resilient zone, and the statistics are speaking for themselves, but we will proceed obviously to tell our own story for the consumption of international markets. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Walter. That is, I think, a very promising conclusion that you came with, and we look forward to how this is going to be managed within the project initiative that is being headed by yourself and supported also, if I'm correctly informed, by Dr. Taleb Rifai, the former Secretary General of the UN WTO. With this, we're hopping now from Johannesburg all the way to the Baltic countries and saying hi to Vlad Koryagin, the CEO or chairman of the board of Baltic Travel Group, a company that is on the market now for more than 20 years. And just in February, Vlad, you have reinvented your image of the company. You have had a new logo created. You were really going to go forward with the fresh air in all your marketing activities. And then came Corona. But Vlad is something like the James Bond of tourism. Just 3 times already in his biography, he was voted Man of the Year in tourism in Latvia. Yeah, so you can be Man of the Year in many different fields, but everything is going back and back and back to Vlad. Man of the Year for 3 times. Born in 1971 and studying the Stockholm School of Economics department in Riga. He's built up a great company, Baltic Travel Group, and we are really curious how you, Vlad, see the situation out of the perspective of the DMC, and also as somebody who is very closely affiliated to this huge Russian market of travelers who sit on their suitcases, eager to travel, frantic to leave the country, but still limited to 99% in doing so. Vlad, welcome having you. You have to demute your microphone.
Yes. Hello. Thank you, Sebastian, for introduction. I think we know each other for more than 20 years, and yes, indeed, the beginning of the year was very challenging. You know, when we organized our 20 years celebration, the theme of the party was Matrix Reloaded, and you know, the party was just before ITB in Berlin. And then, you know, after that, we had a lot of jokes that it was truly reloaded, not just our company and image, but the whole world and the whole travel industry. And please do not make such parties again, because, you know, you never know what's going to happen after that. Indeed, this period was challenging for everybody in the industry. As we know, according to the World Tourism Organization, the decline in this year, international travel will be about 80%. Compare with the last year, and the Baltic states are no exception. Currently, I think we're not going to kiss and hug foreigners or even close friends. We are always keeping the social distance, and of course, compare with other destinations in Europe, we have very low density of population, so we are not that populated as other European countries. So all this together make our countries very safe, and suddenly, you know, despite we never enjoyed much publicity in the Western media, the Baltic states became a sample of the places where everybody should go after COVID restrictions are over. And the Baltic beaches in the cities like Jurmala or in the city like Nida are featured among the safest places in the world. In the top 10, the Baltic capitals, Riga, which is the capital of Latvia, and Vilnius, which is the capital of Lithuania, are considered the safest places to travel. So I think we are enjoying a lot of free PR at the moment, and within European Union, we created the so-called Baltic bubble, which means that even before most countries were still in lockdown, the Baltic states opened borders between each other and allowed their travelers to go freely without staying in quarantine upon arrival to the destination. So later on to this bubble, Finland was added. So even while most of the European countries were closed, we already had some freedom of traveling, at least to our neighbors. It was very good, and it was very exciting that, you know, after several months under quarantine, now you can freely travel to your neighbors. The negative side of this travel is that the economic impact is still very low. It's mostly weekend travelers of the families, which are quite price sensitive in many cases, and basically during weekdays, the hotels which were even open still have very, very low occupancy. And I mean, even within this Baltic travel bubble, we feel that it's not enough to sustain our travel industry. And of course, we're very much looking forward to opening the borders with other European countries where the still travel restrictions are existing. And I mean, these restrictions are changing all the time. You know, 1 week we had Poland opened, and just recently the border with Poland was closed again, which makes it very difficult for us as for incoming tour operator to predict demand for the coach tours, for example, for Germany, which is our very important source market. And if the Poland is closed, we really cannot have possibility to host coach operators and coach groups from Germany. And at the moment, the border with Russia is also closed, and the Russian market, as we know, traditionally is very important source market. So, I mean, we are still operating with a lot of limitations, which makes our life very difficult, and which are threatening the further existence of our business. But we stay positive. The weather in the Baltic is fantastic. The last weekend, the temperature was about 30 degrees, and the temperature in the Baltic Sea, or Ostsee as they say in Germany, was about 24 degrees. So we are really enjoying the tropical weather in the Baltics, and hopefully the borders will be open again. And you know, talking about Russia, the latest information is that big Russian tour operators canceled all their departures up to the middle of July. So there are no any international charter flights planned till the middle of July. However, the domestic tourism in Russia is flourishing and booming, and those Russian visitors who are usually traveling to the Baltic states of Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, they're traveling now to Kaliningrad region, which is a Russian enclave, also on the Baltic Sea, former Königsberg, Eastern Prussia. And I know that already everything is booked there and sold out till September. So we can notice that there is a huge demand for such places as Crimea on the Black Sea, for Russian Far East, and other destinations. So I mean, Russia is a big country. Tradition to travel abroad is quite recent, and you know, most of the time Russians were traveling within Russia. So I think it's of course a big problem for many international tour operators and for DMCs like ourselves, but hopefully by autumn the restrictions will be over and we can continue working with this market. I can't hear you, Sebastian.
Thank you very much. Better now?
Yes, now, yes.
All right. Thanks. Thank you very much, Vlad. Now, hopping over from Riga to London, let us welcome Tom Jenkins as the CEO of the European Tourism Association, heading that organization for 23 years and being one of the most prominent advocates of the tourism industry in Europe. Very warm welcome, Tom. Thank you for being with us here today. I will quote one sentence you have recently mentioned. You said, I think we have nothing to be frightened of. We are looking at a fairly even pattern of demand for travel to Europe in the next 2 to 3 years. No time like the present to come to Europe. If you need Brexit as an excuse to come to Europe, let Brexit be your excuse. Now, the last sentence already implies this must have been before Corona, but it was actually on January 31st that you gave these words on China Global TV Network. Now, the world obviously has changed dramatically ever since then. And just a couple of days ago, in June 19th, you mentioned on an interview on the BBC that by all means, COVID corridors have to be avoided for something that would jeopardize any approach that is necessary at this time to get an organized tourism into Europe back on track. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Tom. Very warm welcome, and the stage is yours.
Well, it's very interesting that you. I'm not on mute. No, it's very interesting. You give me a clear warning about the dangers of speaking frankly, and then ask me to speak frankly. So I'm half-minded to say nothing after that. I will try and put those two remarks into some context, and I'll do so at the end if I may. I'll try and buy myself a couple of minutes. I think listening to your earlier speakers. It is a uniquely difficult situation that we find ourselves in. And the difficulty of it and the uniqueness of that difficulty, I think, has been outlined very well by the people before you. I think, just to start off on a down note, I think the scale of the problem that we're facing is only going to become apparent as the various restrictions we're laboring under get lifted. It is only then that we will see the landscape that we're facing. In reality, the industry is just in a coma at the moment. In a lot of countries, it's being supported by government aid. It's really on a life support system, pending the arrival of clients back into the system. And when you emerge from a coma, things are not the same. Not that the clients are any different. You're not the same. You've got to work out if your legs work. You've got to work out if your hands work. You can work out if you try and work out if you can speak again. These are the challenges that face someone emerging from a coma. And we're going to face some real challenges as an industry, because as an industry, we represent the entire service sector. We're interconnected with everything else. And if you want to take an example, just look at London at the moment. It may be that London opens up air corridors of some description in the next 2 to 3 weeks. But London, even without coronavirus, as it emerges from the lockdown, what state are the pubs are going to be in? What state are the restaurants going to be in? Are the theatres going to be open? Are the attractions going to be open? Are the shops going to be open? The whole status of the service industry in every large city in Europe is going to be looking at itself, wondering if it can survive. And bits of it won't survive. So we are, as I said, looking at a situation where the full scale of what we're dealing with is only going to become apparent in the next 2 to 3 months. I think, and if there was ever a time when the whole interconnectedness of the industry becomes apparent, it is now. Now, what's good about this situation? The answer is, that's the famous question, you know, apart from that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the play? That's one of the great questions. And this is a bit like asking Mrs. Lincoln if she enjoyed the play. I think the tourism industry, firstly, just now, and I go back to what I was saying to the Chinese market back in January, just now, there is never a better time to come to Europe. The deals will be the best deals. The space, if the place is open, the space is yours in a way which it will never have been in the last 25 years, nor will be repeated in the next 25 years. So if we have to kickstart an industry, and our industry needs kickstarting, what a fantastic product to sell to a waiting world, which is a Europe almost empty of financial competition for your dollar. You can go and be king in Venice. You can go and be king in Florence. You can go and do what you like in Rome and Paris and in London. It's all wide open and available, what is open. Secondly, it's really a two-pronged point. One is, this has killed off the debate about over-tourism, most of which was shockingly ill-informed. So we have a vivid illustration of the importance, the central importance that tourism plays within the fabric of city destinations. In London, foreign tourists make up 25% of the footfall in the West End. They make up 50% of the spend in the shops. Watch the West End cope with no 50% of turnover arriving. And that 50% is because there are no tourists. Without tourists, cities fail. And we will, I hope this is just a temporary phenomenon, but boy, is this point being made in every destination in Europe. Secondly, it really, it proves the value of tourism. And I suppose it proves the value also of intermediaries. And I have a special, my association is principally one for those people who add value by acting as an intermediary. And intermediaries do their best and most spectacular value when sales are tough. When sales are easy for everybody, and nobody longs for a tour operator to come in and help sell a hotel which is selling itself. When sales are tough, this is when tour operators, this is when my members really add value. And I'm delighted that we have a situation where people can arrive and get the best deals for the clients. I remember in 2001 when we were staring at what was a bee sting of a problem after the 2001 crisis in comparison to what we're dealing with. I had two of the largest entrepreneurs in the industry sitting on stage in the form of David Babai and Jack Corona, and both of them turned around and said to each other, I would love to be a young man in charge of my own business in this moment, because out of these crises, fortunes get made. So it's fraught with opportunity for businesses. And lastly, I would just like to stress that I think the value of tourism will be proved, the scope of tourism will be understood, and I think you will find that people function, those without large overheads that can cut costs and survive into next year, things will be back to normal in 2021. I think not back to normal in 2021 so much as 2022. I think you will find that 2021 is still a struggle, but 2022 we should be looking at recovery. Do I think the industry is going to be changed dramatically by this? Beyond the staggering financial damage that's going to be inflicted over the next 9 months, I think the pattern of tourism will surprisingly be not that dramatically different. I think the things that were attractive in 2019 were attractive for good reasons. People went to London because London was popular. They went to Paris because London, and not because Paris is popular, because it was popular for good reasons. And I don't think suddenly this is a massive dawn for alternative destinations, though it's a great question for alternative destinations to be asking themselves, how do we reinvent ourselves? How do we present ourselves? Because at the moment, everything is open for discussion. Now, you quite rightly turned around to me and said the demand for Europe looks easy and certain and flat almost for the next 2 to 3 years. I think I said this in January. I think in my defense, and it's very difficult to defend such a statement in the face of the biggest collapse in demand that we've seen since the Second World War. I think I was probably underestimating the ability of nation states to cope with this crisis. I don't think the crisis we're facing in medical terms is dramatically different from that faced by Europe, indeed the world, from the Asian flu epidemic in 68, 69, 70. And the world did not close its economy down in that period. It kept going. We have chosen to close our economies down. And I did not anticipate that. And it's very interesting that when a book gets written on this, the question will be asked, why did we follow the Chinese model? Having said that, I've spoken probably for more than my allotted time. Sebastian, that's me. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. You were absolutely perfect within your time frame. I can learn a lot from you in that regard, but not only in that regard. Actually, I didn't expect you that you would have to defend yourself on what you have said, because you have said it in a completely different context. And at the end of January, that was the perspective of what will happen to tourism under Brexit. And I think the absolute majority of all people involved in tourism at the end of January just did not have on their radar screen what would happen due to a virus that we assumed would play a little role somewhere in the far east of Asia. So I actually took that as an example of how we all had to dramatically change of our perception of the future and what was going on. And thank you for sharing your views and your rather really optimistic views with us today. So then I would like to hop on the plane. I'm not sure if the travel bubble is already in effect that allows me from going from London right into Mumbai. But we'll hear maybe about what the travel bubble means from Subhash Madhvani. Subhash Madhvani is the founder of Namaste India, a travel professional with over 32 years experience in the industry, having visited more than 50 countries and publishing magazines, doing photography, having his own website, subhashmadhvani.com, where he shares all kinds of impressions, engaging in luxury travel. And the latest baby before COVID changed all his plans was to develop marathon travel for Indians all over the world that wanted to participate in running 42.4 kilometers. Subhash, the stage is yours. Thank you for being with us here.
Thank you, Sebastian, for the introduction. Well, it's Namaste Tourism. And I would like to share my screen as well, because I would probably like to change the mood a bit. And well, India is a fascinating story because though India is among the top 5 countries in the world in terms of the COVID cases, the interesting part is the mortality rate in India is just 1% for every 100,000 vis-a-vis the global mortality rate, which is around 6%. And one thing to keep in mind as far as India is concerned is that we are the 7th largest country in the world with 1.3 billion population. So we've not done badly at all. I mean, we've handled the situation pretty well. And the only positive word which is in the year 2020 for everyone, one moment, I'm just seeing, is the word negative, being COVID negative. Well, that's how I would like to start this little session of mine. And what we need to do at this moment is to reboot, restart, rejuvenate, and to think differently. And I've put this across in 5 different letters. The first one being C for change. And we have to change the way we are working and functioning as a tourism industry. And change is going to be the only constant. And we have to firstly start changing the way we communicate with the customers that are there, because it's important to instill the confidence in customers that yes, there is COVID, but it's something which you have to live with for some time before it's totally eradicated. And therefore you have to move on. And how do we move on? Well, there are a few solutions. The second letter that is about opportunity. So there are new ideas and new needs of the customer that we have to address. There is a great demand for private charter flights. I mean, Maldives is starting their flights. I mean, they are willing to accept Indian guests and guests from across the world. But till the time the scheduled carriers are starting, there is talks that there are some hotels who may probably be starting certain charter flights to and from India. And it's not just charter flights. There may be a growing interest for charter yachts. The other thing is, just as Tom mentioned, that the London and the Paris of the world have the buzz and so on. But it's good to also introspect and see what are the other areas which have a lot of scope in the future, like nature and outdoors, for example, spa, spirituality and wellness. Also, offbeat locations. Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia are the examples, as Vlad did mention about it. How to engage the audience is very important, because how to engage the travelers who are intending to travel but are fearful of traveling as of now. Probably they'll start traveling during the last quarter of this year or the beginning of next year. So the next thing is to start with virtual travel experiences. And in fact, post my talk, I will actually share a link, because what we are doing is we are offering a virtual yoga experience with the #1 destination spa in the world, Ananda in the Himalayas, which is based in India. And we'll be offering this session this Sunday on 5th of July, and invite not just the panelists, but all the attendees also to experience how you could do virtual yoga over Zoom and incorporate this to build your immunity. It's a very interesting concept. So I'll actually share this link, and you could share this link with all those who are part of BUZZ.travel. The fourth part is innovation. So one of the leading hotel brands in India, the Taj Mahal Palace and Resorts, they have started with something called the 4D program. By 4D, they mean dream, drive, discover, and delight. And as staycations are catching on, and also vacations. So I just got a mailer from one of the properties in close to Mumbai, where they are letting out their place for over a month for long stays. People will be pampered, and they can stay. They can even do some fitness training in the evening, and they will be taken care of. And that's a trend which is catching on. The other thing which is catching on is small is big. People will go for boutique hotels. They'll also go for buyouts. They'll go and buy out a property exclusively. So those are areas. In fact, Taj itself is coming out with Ama Villas, which is small boutique stays where people can actually buy out the entire property, stay and be taken care of. Experiential holidays will be a big thing, and active leisure. So even people who are participating in marathons, and most of the marathons are called off, there is an opportunity of setting up duathlons where people can do a side jogging experience of a place, and then can do a bit of cycling and seeing the places around. And last but not the least is the D, which has 3 aspects to it: documentation, destination, and DMCs. In terms of documentation, the travel professional today will have to understand what are the insurance conditions. That's very, very critical part of it. What is the health criteria? What are the quarantine rules? As far as destination choices are concerned, it's very important to know what are the destinations opening around. For India, it's Turkey, Maldives, Bhutan, Sri Lanka. These are countries which are opening up. And besides that, there is also a travel bubble being set up between the Indian government and other countries, primarily US, UK, France, and Germany, where they are planning this green corridor or travel bubble, where there will be point-to-point flights into US, into UK, France, and Germany. Probably it will be set up by mid-July or end of July. So there is a huge opportunity for incoming tourists to India, as well as for travelers who want to travel out of India to these countries. So there could be a possibility of selective travel to certain places. So just as I started my brief introduction of what my perspective is as far as tourism in general is concerned, and I started with the only positive word being negative, I would like to conclude with a negative thing, which is a fear in everybody's mind, which is COVID. But instead of looking at COVID, look at C for change, O for opportunity, V for virtual travel, I for innovation, D for documentation, destination, and yes, DMCs will become a very critical part, because in case someone is traveling to, let's say, a place in Europe, it could be maybe a Baltic country, it could be UK, it could be France, it could be anywhere. And say there is a spike of cases or there are some changes, it's the DMC which will handhold the individual traveler and will assist the traveler to find ways and solutions as to how they can get back easily and seamlessly without any hindrance. So this is my brief introduction in a nutshell. as to what should be the approach. We should all be positive and see how we can face this situation. I'll also be sharing the link.
Thank you.
Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Subhash. Now, it is really interesting. I think a nice also last contribution to our panel today. The abbreviations you connected to the word COVID with your personal links to what is needed to be done in not only rethinking but also redoing. As our time is quite limited now regarding the opportunities for discussion, I would just connect to what you have just said now, Subhash, to what Tom would probably categorically reject, the so-called travel bubble. You made your point, Subhash. I would like to hear Tom as a reaction on that. What do you think about travel bubbles, or the possibility of giving at least certain ways of tourism a chance?
Well, look, I mean, travel bubbles are a bad idea insofar as what was needed in Europe was a general lifting and liberation within the Schengen area, and I think that is what the Commission is gunning for, and I think that is what they'll maintain. I think the trouble with travel corridors as such, virtuous though they seem in theory, they take place within a highly complicated political environment. And one of the great falsehoods of the current crisis is that decisions are being taken on the basis of scientific advice. This is rubbish. You can find a scientist to support any political decision, and all the decisions that we're seeing are political. And it's something we have to recognize. And nothing is more political than establishing an air bridge. And invariably, the country that is establishing this air bridge says that they only wish to deal with countries with a lower infection rate than themselves. This is a perfectly coherent statement if you're completely pig-headed and stupid. Because what does the country you're dealing with say? Does it say, well, the only country I'm going to deal with is a country with a higher infection rate than myself? So the British were going out saying that they only wish to do deals with countries where in reality, the British are the people who should have been quarantined. This is the stupidity, essential stupidity of air bridges and to a certain extent bubbles. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Tom. But what is in common in all these discussions, whether we look to the Caribbean, to the very diverse situations on the African continent, to the United States, Europe, or India, is that all of these present discussions on how to kickstart tourism in terms of the regulations that definitely need to come in place, that this discussion is a very political one. It becomes political right in the moment it begins. Yeah. As I mentioned before, we have in Europe the situation now that the European governments agreed to allow visitors from non-European countries, only 15 countries. Yeah? Amongst them is not the USA, amongst them is not Russia. I know Russia is taking it very personal. Yeah? They already say, okay, this is the next level of sanctions. Yeah? I don't know how the Americans look at it. Will, maybe you can share us your opinion with us, or your experiences on how this is being looked at from the United States point of view.
Well, I mean, it doesn't look good. I have, as you know, plenty of members who sell Europe in the United States. I think it has to be recognized also that the Europeans have not been welcoming America for the last 4 to 5 months. There's a certain degree of reciprocity here. And I think it's very interesting
absolutely.
The Russians are saying that this, to a certain extent, is a sanctions issue.
Tom?
Yeah?
Tom, if you would allow me, I would love to hear what, if Will has anything to share with us.
I thought you said Will rather than me. Let Will speak, by all means.
Tom, I think you hit it on the head on the politics of the issue, and certainly there's nobody's happy to see that the no travel to the EU, and I think everybody in the travel industry is very very hopeful that we're going to be able to get to an open travel again, and we're certainly all very focused on when those international flights are going to restart. I think it's critical to recognize, however, that while a lot of politics are being, are driving these decisions, the actual operational issues that the airlines are facing in terms of, bringing planes back on board and bringing pilots certification, it's going to take a lot of time once we get through all the politics of this, just to get the airline industry flying again. And that's something that I'm really, really focused on. And hopefully we can start to see the planes flying, because it's going to take a long time to get that entire air travel system back in place.
Right. Thank you. One question also to Walter in Johannesburg. Obviously, every kind of tourism requires air travel, as just Will pointed out as well. Now, the airline industry in South Africa is hit exceptionally hard, I believe, and the number of flights for a long time will probably stay very much reduced, or in the future will be carried out only by other global players. How does that affect your plans for Project Hope recovery measures?
Well, before I get to that, I just want to point out to the iron of travel advisories, because before COVID, Africa was bearing the brand of travel advisories. Now I see that we are swapping experiences with countries like the United States. But just to say that I think the attitude in Africa is to open up. To open up as quickly as possible, starting with domestic tourism. We are going to test a lot of our safety and security protocols on ourselves first, I think, beginning with the domestic tourism, going forward to regional travel. But before you cut me short, I wanted to point out the essence of African products, product codes, as we see them, what will come back first. We have natural social distancing products like transfrontier conservation areas, peace parks. I think those are attractive to not just Africans, but more importantly to international tourism. They are safe products by virtue of their natural social distancing specifications. We are also grouping around UNESCO designated products. We have 129 UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Africa, 40 natural, 84 cultural, and 5 a combination of both cultural and natural. We are going to group around this in bringing back international tourism. The third product, of course, is your sand and sea, the blue economy. That is what we are working on first immediately, and it will bring back together all Africa's coastlines. But in terms of opening up the airspace, we're already sick with most of our airlines before COVID. Most of our African airlines were non-viable. And that's why I raised the issue of economic resilience. And it is in this area that we are obviously looking for help. It's a natural investment destination for many investors who may want to look at reviving African airlines. So on our own, it won't happen. We have to go back, I think, to the World Bank, to IMF, and I'm happy that there's a lot of support coming, even to countries like Zimbabwe. Just recently, just 3-4 days ago, the IMF and World Bank system announced a $2 billion support direct to business. So I see there will be a lot of direct assistance to business, which will include, and that's an opportunity for investors. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Walter, for sharing that. We'll be now in the middle of a period where tourism can evolve again. But then what about the hurricanes? You have to demute yourself,
sorry.
please.
Yes. One of the great things about the Caribbean is that there is a lot of collaboration, and disasters such as hurricanes, the solution does not rest within the hands of tourism. we have our disaster preparedness agencies, our environmental agencies, our regional health agencies. So how the Caribbean deals with any of these problems is a collaborative approach. So if we are faced with a hurricane season again, it is something that tourism will have to collaborate with the other ministries and agencies and address the situation with the best possible solutions that we have in place. So of course, no one wants to go into hurricane season, but nature is nature. And, you know, as much as we can mitigate the impact of some climate issues, we cannot always avoid them. And therefore, our region is collaborating on what needs to be in place to deal with this disaster should it come to our shores. At the moment, we can't say, and we don't get hurricanes every year, thankfully, but unfortunately, in recent times, they have left a very heavy footprint, but it's not always. Sometimes it is a rainy season, but again, as I've said, it's going to be about collaboration. It's not just tourism that deals with it, but all the agencies across the region.
Sure. All right. Thank you so much. Now, looking at the time, please do allow me, Subhash and Vlad, that my last question I put to both of you at the same time, and then maybe each of you can give me a quick answer on that one. You might have heard that I think yesterday the World Travel and Tourism Council created the so-called Safe Travel Stamp, which can easily be downloaded on the website of the WTTC. The process is very easy. You just have to confirm that you're willing to comply with the protocols and regulations that are mentioned there. And then as a tour operator or a rental car company or whatever touristic supplier, you just tick that you agree, and you can download a logo which you can put on your website, and which looks quite official because it has the WTTC logo on it. Do you think such a stamp really can guarantee safe travels, or is that more of a marketing gag in order to frantically find some ways of awakening encouragement for the customers? What is your personal opinion on such a stamp? Vlad, maybe you can begin.
I think it reminds me on the situation with sustainability. There are a lot of organizations where you can pass through some very simple test, put a button confirm, and you automatically become sustainable organization. And very often, I mean, this is only a name on the diploma, which means you are sustainable. So I think this type of endorsement, I think from marketing perspective, it's very good that we have such thing. If some customer asking, are your property or are your DMC or are your supplier is taking into consideration the COVID issues, we can always show this paper. And this will give some, let's say, some state of calm to our customers. But if we talk, from a serious point of view, I think it's not just a diploma. There should be a very special rules and education and many other serious things. So, I mean, this piece of paper, it's more to calm down the customers, but I don't think it's very serious.
Thank you so much, Vlad, for your opinion. Subhash, what do you think about it?
To a certain extent, I endorse with what Vlad says, but even in India, interestingly, there was a travel trade publication which tied up with World Health Organization and came out with a COVID smart program or COVID smart guideline. Now, what happens is this basically will instill confidence, because there is a bit of fear psychosis with the customers, and to remove these friction points of, should I travel or not travel? If there is this kind of stamp, the customer feels there is certain protocol being maintained, but is it being implemented is a key question here. And to what extent is it being implemented? It's not just the stamp, but actually at each stage, one has to identify as to what is the safety protocol being maintained from the time the person leaves his place in a city right up to the point he reaches the destination. whether it's the flights, whether it's the hotels, it's the guides, the transportation. So each section of that experience should be taken into account, because travel is a holistic experience. I mean, this is what I would say. So it's a bit tricky. So
all right, thank you so much. So we have a few insights that we heard today. We have even more outlooks that we heard from all of you today. And we have certainly a lot of themes that need to be discussed in the future. And what we all have learned as well is that as we look things, that the way we look at things today might dramatically already be different tomorrow. I think that is a learning that we all have in these times, no matter on which regions of the world we are, or in which field of professional or even personal life circumstances we are. And BUZZ.travel gives a huge possibility to address a lot of these questions which are related to our industry, with all the upcoming events in this context this week. I would like to thank all of you for your participation. It was not only a great pleasure, it was a huge honor to have you on our panel today on the first day of the BUZZ.travel Digital Expo. I wish you all the best. Luck, health in first place, and the best spirits to overcome the situation and to look positively in the future. Thank you so much for being with us today here, all to your panelists and the audience as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.